first Qualtrics Corner webinar. This is the first one of these webinars that we will be hosting on Qualtrics. They will be the first Monday of each month, Qualtrics Corner, so keep an eye out for that. The intention here is that we're going to highlight specific features and applied use cases that are specific to higher education and research. Qualtrics has a great help online, but it's somewhat geared towards the marketing and retail and customer satisfaction sectors, so sometimes it's not always immediately clear how that translates to a research use case. So that's what we're hoping to do with some of these. That said, it is not a replacement for that online training that Qualtrics offers. That should still remain your primary source of training and support. So as Kim mentioned, this session is being recorded. We have a number of workshops throughout the year, and they are all recorded and posted in our archived section on the website. I will share these slides with all of you after the session, so don't worry about trying to jot down the links. For any of those upcoming events, we will send you notices of that if you're on our list, but you can also at any time visit the EHE Research Events Calendar, which is co-hosted by the Research Methodology Center. So today's topic is using contact lists, and we're going to cover importing data, sharing contacts, generating samples, and we'll talk a little bit about panel company integration and paying for panels. If you've used Qualtrics before last summer, let's say, they had a previous version of Qualtrics, and this function was called panels in that version. I was using it then, so I still sometimes will call them panels, but just know that panels and contacts are the same thing. So if I say the wrong word, they mean the same thing. But nothing really changed in the functionality of how it works. Contact lists are used for sending surveys via email through Qualtrics to a known list of participants. It's really not for sending anonymous surveys, although you can still do that. But you still have to have an email address to use the contact lists function. We can also talk about this panel company integration. I kind of moved that to the end of the presentation, so we will get back to that. So your contacts can be added manually, but a lot of times you have a long list and that would take a long time, so the best way to do it is to import them from Excel. However, Qualtrics doesn't import native Excel files, which are usually have the XLS or XLSX file extensions. Files in Qualtrics have to be in comma-separated value format, which is also known as CSV. So I think the best practice there is to create the file in Excel as that native file type and then save a copy in CSV format. The reason for that is as you come in and out of a CSV file, there's always the potential for corruption of certain formatting. It's noticed in dates, it's noticed in phone numbers. There's some between CSV and Excel that doesn't always maintain the formatting the way it should. So my best word of advice is to use your Excel document for any editing or adding or changing your contact lists, and then save it to a CSV just before you import it into Qualtrics. So there is an import template to help you when you're in Qualtrics. The import functionality of Qualtrics in a CSV, there's certain headings that you have to have, and they have to be in a certain order, and they have to have that specific name. So a good thing to do is just download this example document and save it on your drive somewhere, and you can just go back and refer to it. Just copy the header and paste it into your new file to make sure that you've got everything that they need. So when you open the Add Contacts section, you will have to name your contacts first, your contact list first, and assign it to a folder. If you don't assign it to a folder, it just goes automatically into the uncategorized folder list. And you'll see all of this in just a moment when we go live into Qualtrics. But I won't really talk much about folders at the moment, but they're a good thing to use to keep your surveys and your contact lists and various things organized in an order, especially if you send out a lot of different survey types. The folders can be your friend. So when you name your contact list and save it to that folder, down here in the far right-hand corner, there's an example document that you can download. And that's what I just download and keep to reuse. So when you open that example document up, it's a CSV Excel file, but you'll notice that this header row is exactly what Qualtrics needs to have to recognize it as a contact list. First name has to be capitalized, capital F, capital N, all one word. And this primary email has to say primary. If it just says email, for some reason, Qualtrics does not like that. So the next field over is external data reference. That's pretty much just a Qualtrics housekeeping field, so you don't really have to do anything with that. Just leave that blank. Everything that follows external data reference is embedded data. I'm going to cover embedded data in a future webinar, so we won't talk much about that right now. So it's really just these first three fields that you need to worry about. You still have to have external data reference on there. You don't have to have embedded data, but you have to have external data reference in your file for Qualtrics to recognize it. So now I'm going to end the slideshow for just a moment, and we're going to hop over to Qualtrics. Can everybody see the Qualtrics screen on their screen? Okay, so once you've logged into Qualtrics, you have the Contacts tab bar over here, which, as I say, used to be called Panels. And if you're not familiar with Qualtrics, this is how you navigate through Qualtrics. Is this whole top bar? This stays there throughout every different panel that you use. It stays here. So you go to the Contacts tab. Yeah.
Heather.
Yes.
Before we go too much farther, Rachel had a question about your example spreadsheet, and she says, so the only first 4 columns are necessary, external data isn't needed. So Rachel, do you want to ask your question if Heather doesn't quite understand what you typed?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so just to clarify, those last columns that said embedded data, I wrote external, excuse me. So those embedded data columns aren't necessary to
That's
enter.
correct. Everything up to and including external data reference has to be there, but the embedded data columns do not.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rachel.
Okay, so we're in our Contacts tab, and you have Create Contact Lists, so we'll go ahead and do that, and this is where I'm talking that you have to give it a name and then assign it a folder, and I'm just going to call this Qualtrics Webinar, and I'm saving it to my demo sandbox folder. And so then when you get here, this is where that example document lives that you can download. And then once you have your file, you click Browse, and you browse to wherever that CSV file lives, and click Open. And it will bring up a little preview of what your Qualtrics list is going to look like. It just shows you like the first 3 or 4 contacts, so you can make sure that everything looks like you would expect it to look. I don't know why they do that in this column format. That always throws me every time because I expect it to see horizontally, but everything looks good here, so we are going to add contacts. And it shows you its progress as it's moving along. And then once it's done, it says View Contact List. You could click on that, open your contacts, and make sure again that everything looks as you would expect it to. So I have 10 contacts in my contact list, and now I am ready to distribute my survey using my contact list. So to do that, we will hop back over to Projects, and I have picked a sample survey that I've created here. Just another little tip that I find useful with Qualtrics, even if you're sending your survey through a contact list of known people, it's always a good idea to include this first question block asking people for their name and contact information, whatever you may need from them. Even if you have assigned specific links to folks, emails still get forwarded. Sometimes somebody else completes the survey that was not their link intended to. So this is just your backup system that you make sure that you're getting the name of the person that that actually completed the survey, not necessarily the person that it was mailed to. And you'll see that when you download your results. You'll see the column that has the first name and last name and email of who the survey went to. But then if you created this question field as well, you'll see that next to it. So you'll be able to compare who it was sent to and who responded. So that's just a little tip for your survey design. So when you go to distributions and you're ready to send out your survey, there are a few different ways. There are a few different ways you can send it out, but we are focusing today on emails. So you click your compose email. And now this is where you're going to select your contact list that you created and uploaded. You can pick from a library, and that's where we'll talk about sharing contacts to a group a little bit later, but most of your library stuff is going to be in your own folder. For some reason, Qualtrics doesn't alphabetize these contact lists, which makes it a little hard to find. As you'll see, I have 5 pages of lists here, so you just navigate back and forth through that list until you find the one that you're looking for. This is the one that we want. So we are going to select that, and we're going to select the entire contact list. We'll get to samples here in just a little bit, but we're going to do the entire contact list. It's going to show you that you've got 10 contacts here. If you're paranoid and you want to check, you can scroll through that list to make sure that you've got everybody that you expect to have. Then you have this from section. You can assign the name and the reply to email to anyone. It doesn't have to be, if you're sending on behalf of someone else, you can put their name and information in here. I usually put Kim's contact information in here when we send out surveys for the EHE Office of Research. This is the problem. OSU has the branding group, the Uber group of Qualtrics on campus, had looked at changing this to be something branded OSU, so no reply at osu.edu or what have you. And they tested it, and for some reason it just didn't work the way that they expected it to. So for right now, we are stuck with this being the return address. It's a good idea to maybe put in this email that, or if send out something saying, you know, if this lands in your spam, if they're expecting it, if they're expecting the survey is going to come out. If you haven't heard from people that you would expect to hear from, send them a follow-up email and say, please check your spam folder, because sometimes this does get lost in the spam. Or as happened to me the other day, I sent this out and everybody thought this was from Qualtrics Corporate, so they all ignored it, but it was actually for me. So then you can set how soon do you want this email to go out. You can send it now, or you can send it to, you know, a year from now, or whatever custom schedule you want. But we're just going to pick send now, and then you can type in the subject line. And then here you can create a message that you've already pre-loaded into your message library, or you can just create one on the fly. And here you have a whole bunch of tools that you can use to format your email. You can insert images and pipe text, all kinds of crazy things that I may cover in a future webinar. So this is your basic format of your email. And it creates, by default, it creates a personalized link for each person in your contact list. You can change that if you go to this Show Advanced Options. You can choose a different link type. You can set it to be anonymous. You can set it to be multiple completes. The multiple completes, you have to be a little careful there, because depending on what you've set up in your survey, if you have checked ballot box stuffing that you don't allow them to complete it more than once, that can conflict with this multiple complete. So just be aware of that. And if you choose anonymous, although you are sending it to a contact list, the data that comes back to you will still be anonymized. So you will not be able to tell who responded to your survey. You will not be able to track whether specific participants had responded or not. So really, if you're using the panel distribution method, individual link is the way to go for most scenarios. You can also set the link to expire in a certain period of time. If you're only doing the survey for 30 days or however long you want to keep it open, you can shut that link down um, at any time that you choose. So you can preview your email, but we'll just, for our purposes, we're just going to send it now. Depending on how your list is and your internet connection, it can.
Heather, while we're waiting for that
Yeah.
to work, Ashley said something about replacing the from address with your own. And I think what Ashley said too is it goes to spam less often. I mean, I want people to know that that thing is coming from the Office of Research or, you know, whatever. So, Ashley, did you want to say a little bit more about what you were thinking, or are you good? Oh, okay, Ashley doesn't have her mic connected. Heather, do you want to say anything else about that from line?
I have tried doing that before. I've tried putting my name in there, and Qualtrics rejects it. It has
Oh,
to
okay.
recognize it as being a Qualtrics related. They have some kind of tracking system in there that they use to do that. And likewise, there's a little snafu that they have with when you're embedding hyperlinks into your messages. Once it's sent out by Qualtrics, it changes that link into a big, long, monster, awful-looking thing. So when you send that email, you should just send it as, you know, click here and then embed your link there rather than pasting the entire link, because it will get really skewed and funny-looking. And I talked to Qualtrics about that, and they said they do that because they track all of the attachments that go out in emails. They track all the links that are linked to. And so they put their own little stamp on your link. But if you use just words and then a link, it still does that, but it's not shown to the people that are receiving the email. So it's
Okay.
just a little bit cleaner.
So Heather, so is it the follow-up emails that you say it's like from Office of Research or something like that, not the original email?
No, not the original email. So if you are
Okay.
scheduling a reminder, it's still going to show this from address.
I see.
We'll just go ahead and let's just do a little.
Okay. Well, Ashley must seem to say that it's like on that original email you can change the from.
Okay.
Huh.
So see, when I'm doing it here, you're seeing this SPF check fails. And
Yeah.
So it's not. There are exceptions to that. You can, through OSU brand admin, you can apply to have a specific address assigned to you.
Okay.
I am trying to go through that process right now to see how that works, so that maybe somebody has already done that, and that's what Ashley's using. But as far as I've been aware, you get this fail check every time you try to do it.
Okay.
If Ashley does know something more about that, please share. Please email me.
Yes.
And tell me I'm wrong. I'm happy to be wrong. So now we've sent our survey out through our distribution list.
Rebecca, I'm sorry, Heather. Ashley did say, what does that fail mean? Does that mean that you cannot send that email through the system?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It will just.
It just doesn't go.
It just doesn't go.
Okay.
And
Karen, oh, I'm sorry. Karen also had a question, something about I'm having trouble coding responses if I don't want them to be anonymous. Is this appropriate time to talk about that, or is that going to be the topic of something else, or another
that may
webinar?
be a topic of something else.
Okay.
The scenario that I can see if I can address it somewhat quickly. The scenario that I would see there is you have a list of participants and you're assigning them maybe a participant ID number or some kind of number that hooks back to their identifying information. If you do that, you have to create a couple of different contact lists, and there is a way to do it, but it's a little bit cumbersome. It's a few different steps.
Okay.
So if
Karen,
you're interested in that, send me an email, and
yeah.
And we'll think about a way to present that.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this too, even if it is in the middle of this. If you have other topics you would like to see addressed, please contact Heather separately, and she can get that on the agenda for future webinars. Okay, go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of you responded to a survey that I already sent out asking about topics. And I'm probably going to take our next topic from that, of whatever seemed to be the next most requested topic. But please, if you come up with something, send it to me, and we'll figure out a way to get it out there.
Okay.
So our list has been sent. If for some reason an email had failed, if it was a bad email address, it would show you here that something had bounced, or and there are ways to you can download this history, and it will show you when it went out, and it'll show you all the metadata about your email. And then if you want to view your distribution, it's just going to show you what you already sent. You can't really do anything with it. It just shows you what you sent if you don't remember. And then you can just, as maybe you know, you can schedule a reminder that goes out to all the people that haven't responded yet. You can schedule a thank you. There's a number of follow-up things that you can do when you've used this contact list. So now let's jump over and start talking about moving. Well, let's backtrack for 1 second. If you've sent your list and then you need to add more names to that list, you can do the same thing. You can go back, create that list, and then add more contacts to it, browse, upload that list. You can either use the same list that you had before, or you can create a new list. I recommend that you create a new list and just add it, append it on here. If you leave the same names on there, they will come in as duplicates. Now, Qualtrics does handle that. There will be a little red box that pops up here that says you've got duplicates, and it'll say consolidate duplicates, and you can go in one by one and resolve those duplicates. But once the survey's gone out, certain metadata gets attached to that, and then it's hard to know which contact you should pick. And best practice, I think, is really just to add brand new names as a new CSV and push them in there. So now, once you have had your contact list, if you needed to share this list, unfortunately, Qualtrics has made sharing surveys very easy, not so much so with contact lists. The only way that I'm aware of to share a contact list through Qualtrics, I mean, of course, you can email your CSV file to someone and they can upload it on their end. But the only way to share it through Qualtrics is to move your list. So you can move this list, and you can pick a library that you're going to send it to. So, for example, at the Office of Research, we have a shared library that we use. So I could move this list into that shared library where everyone can access it. But be aware that then that's the only place you can get to that contact list, and whoever makes changes to that list, that becomes the living document. So be cautious about doing that. Make sure it's a list that you really do want to share and have be a living document. So that's how you would share a list. Pretty simple. I wish they had the same capability that they had with sharing a survey, where you could share it with just one individual, but so far we have not seen that. So now, if you have a contact list and you want to create just a sample of that list, some kind of little subset, if you go up to this List Options tab, there is a Generate Sample option. So then you come in here and you can enter a name for your sample. So it's telling you that it's a subset of this panel, and you can say, this is my control group. And then you set a max sample size. Obviously, we only have 10 people in our list, so we're not going to get 500 out of it. So let's just say we want half. Then you can choose how random you want this to be. I don't really know what faster means. I guess that's if you have 1,500 names, that it's going to weed through the randomization faster. It has some kind of algorithm that it uses to pick those. But if you're doing this, chances are you really are looking for true random. So I would just pull it down there to more random. You can add some sample conditions here. They're not the sample conditions that I would think of, if I wanted to pick out all females or something like that. You could do that if that field was part of your embedded data, which again I will talk about at a later time. But that's the only way you could pull that particular information back out of a sample group, is if it was part of their embedded data. But the other thing you can do is pull by recipient history, which I'm not really sure how useful that is. It just shows you, when the last survey they took or the last email invitation, and it gives you a timeline of how long ago that can be. But the one that I would suggest would get the most use would be this recipient sample membership. So you say not a member of any group, and then it'll give you that. It'll be like a fresh sample. So we are going to go in here, and you know what? I think it might be rejecting me because I don't have enough. There is a limit for some reason on how many participants you have to have before you can generate a sample. So let's just back out of that for a second, and let's pick a different list.
Heather, while you're doing that, I just wanted to tell you that you've got about 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So
okay.
Let's go ahead and get this wrapped up in the next 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, I can do that. So here we go. We're going to generate a sample. We've got 425 people in here. We only want 25 of them. And we're just going to call this a test. And we're going to generate our sample. So then now if we go back into our surveys, we want to send a distribution, contacts, and we pick the same list. Now we have, oh no, I had to use the other list, didn't I? Sorry. Now, for the sake of time, that's where you would find it. You would navigate to that same list, and then you would have a list of all your samples from that list. As I say, the most common scenario for that would be if you have a study where you're dividing people into arms. You could pick a control arm and an intervention arm by using that the subset that they're not a member of a previous list. So you can create your control list first, and then go back and say, choose me more random people that aren't already in my control list. And it'll generate that sample for you. So now I think we're pretty much done with being in Qualtrics. Let me just double check my notes to make sure that I've gotten through all that. So I'm going to hop out of Qualtrics and hop back into our, So if you need respondents for your survey, if you want to send this out to a certain demographic, Qualtrics does provide panel services for that for an additional cost, of course. And if you're setting it up to work with Amazon MTurk or some other panel services, you need to contact Qualtrics for help with that, because it can be a little complex to set up that integration. If you're interested in purchasing from Qualtrics, there's a link there. You just provide them with what you're looking for, and they will price you out a contact list that meets those specifications. If you want to use Amazon MTurk, I found a pretty good user guide through this journal extension. It looks like it was created maybe from the Minnesota extension group, and it's got a pretty good walkthrough of using Qualtrics and MTurk. So that's all I have. Does anybody have any other questions that we can answer? You see any questions, Kim, that we've missed?
You know, I don't, but I will say I recognize a few PIs on this call, principal investigators, and just think about when you're writing proposals, make sure that you budget what you need to collect and manage your data and analyze your data. You know, don't forget that. So, you know, data storage, you're collecting all this data, but there's also storage costs, and we can sure help you in the Office of Research to figure out what those costs would be, so that you don't get a proposal funded and then in fact not have the money to actually do what you need to do. All right. Well, Heather, that was wonderful. We're going to go ahead and turn off the recording, and we will